Picture this: a plane cruising at 460 miles an hour, high above the clouds, burning fuel at a rate that would embarrass most SUVs stuck in traffic. 18 miles per gallon. At that speed. That's not a typo, and it's not a marketing gimmick. It comes down to one wild decision in how this thing is shaped. A design trick called laminar flow that lets the fuselage cheat its way past drag. And once you understand how it works, the rest of this story only gets stranger. An egg-shaped airplane blew past efficiency numbers most engineers figured were impossible. And weirdly enough, the shape wasn't even the strangest part of this story. Walk into the hangar and take a look at this thing, and your first reaction probably isn't sleek or advanced. It's more like, why does this look like an egg with wings bolted on? Most people laugh first and ask questions second. Then somebody reads off the numbers and the laughing stops. Cruising near 460 miles an hour. Fuel economy claimed at 18 to 25 miles per gallon. A glide ratio that beats plenty of dedicated gliders. Operating costs sitting around 85% lower than a typical business jet. None of that should line up. And yet somehow it does. That aircraft is the Celera 500L, and it didn't roll out of Boeing or Gulfstream. It came from a small company called Otto Aviation, built around one guy, Bill Otto Sr. He wasn't tinkering in a garage on weekends either. This is someone who spent years doing research work at Los Alamos before becoming chief scientist at North American Aviation, the outfit responsible for the P-51 Mustang and the X-15 rocket plane. So when a guy with that resume decides to throw out the aircraft design rulebook and start fresh, people pay attention. Instead of tweaking something that already existed, Otto asked a simpler question. What happens if you build an aircraft from a blank sheet with the entire design centered around one goal? Killing drag? That question turned into the whole project. Back in 2015, a small team locked themselves inside a hangar in California and spent 3 years chasing that idea down. By January 2018, the prototype was airborne. Everybody assumed the big claims would fall apart the second real testing began. That's usually how it goes with ambitious prototypes. Except this time, it didn't. The strange little plane just kept holding up, flight after flight. Which brings up the obvious question: why build something shaped like an egg in the first place? Turns out, the answer comes down to a problem nearly every aircraft runs into the moment it leaves the runway. At first glance, the Celera looks almost unfinished, like someone forgot to add the usual bumps and lines you'd expect on a plane. The body is smooth, shaped like a teardrop. The wings are long and thin, closer to what you'd see on a glider than a business aircraft. And instead of sitting up front, the propeller is mounted at the back. Every choice on this airframe looks a little off, but every single one exists for exactly one reason: cutting drag down to nothing. The secret behind it is something aerodynamicists call laminar flow. Here's an easy way to picture it. Pour honey across a smooth sheet of glass, and it moves in clean, even layers, gliding without disruption. Now pour that same honey over rough concrete, and it breaks apart instantly, swirling in every direction. That messy version is basically what happens to air moving across most airplanes, thanks to rivets, seams, antennas, and 100 other tiny surface features most of us never notice. Otto's engineers went after every one of those disruptions like it was personal. Rivets got buried under the surface. Panels were blended together so there wasn't a seam to catch the air. Even the smallest surface details were rethought just to keep air gliding smoothly across the plane instead of tumbling off in turbulence. And the payoff was real. Flight testing came back showing roughly a 59% reduction in drag compared to other aircraft of similar size. That's not a minor efficiency bump. That's the kind of number that changes how an entire aircraft behaves in the air. Once you cut drag down that far, the plane basically starts acting like a glider that happens to have an engine bolted on. It slices through the air instead of muscling its way through it, which means every gallon of fuel stretches a lot farther than it normally would. But the shape alone wasn't the full answer. They still needed an engine that could take advantage of all that efficiency. And the choice they landed on caught almost everyone in the industry off guard. Most people assumed Otto would go with a small jet engine, or maybe a turboprop, something that at least sounds like it belongs in an aircraft like this. Instead, they went with a certified diesel engine, which sounded completely backwards to a lot of aviation people. Diesel belongs under the hood of a semi-truck, not tucked into a sleek personal aircraft. At least that's what everybody assumed going in. Sitting at the back of the plane is a red A03 V12 twin-turbo diesel, cranking out roughly 550 horsepower and spinning a pusher propeller behind the tail. It can run on jet A1, biodiesel, or sustainable aviation fuel, and it had already picked up certification in both Europe and the United States before this project got serious, which skipped past one of the slowest, most frustrating parts of getting any new aircraft off the ground. The logic behind choosing diesel makes more sense once you look at the actual math. Diesel engines are naturally more fuel efficient than comparable gas engines, and the turbochargers help keep performance steady even at altitude, where thinner air usually starts robbing engines of power. Combine that with the aircraft's insanely low drag, and Otto projected fuel economy somewhere between 18 and 25 nautical miles per gallon. Stack that against most light business jets, which often struggle to squeeze out even 3 miles per gallon, and the gap starts to feel almost unfair. The company didn't just claim this on paper, either. They ran successful test flights burning sustainable aviation fuel, proving this plane could be efficient and cleaner at the same time. Suddenly, this odd-looking prototype wasn't just about saving fuel anymore. It was starting to look like a hint at where aviation might actually be headed next. Here's the part that catches most people off guard, though. Looking at this thing from the outside, you'd probably assume passengers were paying for all that efficiency with cramped legroom. You'd be dead wrong. This is where the Celera flips expectations on their head. Normally, when engineers chase this level of aerodynamic efficiency, cabin space is the first thing sacrificed. Thin fuselage, tight seating, barely enough room to move. That's usually the trade-off. Looking at the Celera's unusual shape from outside, you'd brace yourself for the same story. Then you actually step inside, and it's a completely different aircraft. Despite that teardrop shell, the cabin feels genuinely roomy. Ceiling height comes in around 6 feet 2 inches, meaning most passengers can actually stand up straight without ducking. There are 6 first-class style seats, a proper lavatory, and enough space to make longer flights bearable instead of miserable. It even beats out the interior volume of aircraft like the Beechcraft King Air 350 and the Cessna Citation CJ3+, 2 direct competitors in the business aviation space. Somehow, they figured out how to cut drag without shrinking a single inch of cabin space. The cockpit follows that same "keep it simple" philosophy. Rather than handing pilots a dozen separate engine controls to juggle mid-flight, the Celera runs on a single power lever tied into an electronic engine management system that quietly handles the complicated stuff in the background. That translates into shorter training time and a lot less mental workload during actual flights. Then come the numbers that made the industry stop and take notice. The Celera is built to cruise near 460 miles an hour at 30,000 feet, with a range around 4,500 nautical miles carrying 6 people on board, and it can take off from runways shorter than 3,300 feet. That short runway capability opens up access to more than 5,000 regional airports across the United States, meaning travelers could skip crowded major hubs entirely and land somewhere far closer to wherever they actually needed to be. Maybe the single most impressive number, though, is the glide ratio, 22:1. That means for every foot of altitude the plane loses, it glides forward 22 feet. If the engine cut out mid-flight, the aircraft could theoretically glide well over 120 miles before it needed to come down. Instead of turning into an instant emergency, pilots would have real time to find somewhere safe to put it down. It practically flies like a sailplane hauling 6 passengers along for the ride. Those numbers alone were already hard to fully believe. But then Otto dropped the figure that really turned heads across the industry: what it actually costs to fly one of these things. Building something fast is one kind of challenge. Building something efficient is a harder one. But building an aircraft that's dramatically cheaper to operate than everything else in its class, that's the part that got people in the industry to sit up and pay attention. Otto put the Celera's total operating cost at roughly $328 per flight hour, covering fuel, maintenance, oil, and engine reserves combined. Now stack that against a Citation CJ3+, which runs around $2,100 an hour, or a King Air 350 sitting near $1,500 an hour. If those figures hold up in real-world operation, this isn't just a fuel-saving gimmick. It rewrites the cost structure of private flying as we know it. And the savings don't stop at the fuel pump. Because it's running a liquid-cooled diesel engine, maintenance intervals stretch out far longer than what typical turbine engines demand. Diesels tend to run cooler and hold up longer between major overhauls. Across a service life of roughly 20,000 flight hours, Otto estimated close to $40 million in savings per aircraft compared to a similar business jet. Multiply that across an entire fleet, and it becomes genuinely hard to ignore. There's an environmental angle here too. Testing suggested emissions came in around 80% lower than comparable business jets, and roughly 40% lower per passenger than commercial airline flights. It cleared future FAA emissions standards years before those rules were even scheduled to take effect. And because it had already flown successfully on sustainable aviation fuel, those weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They'd actually been proven in the air. Toss in access to thousands of smaller regional airports, and passengers get to skip the entire hub airport slog most private flyers deal with. Less time wasted, less fuel burned, lower costs across the board. Put together, it honestly starts to sound a little too good to be true. But here's the twist almost nobody saw coming. After proving every one of these claims in the air, the Celera was never meant to become the final product. By the end of 2024, the Celera 500L had accomplished something very few experimental aircraft managed to pull off. It backed up every ambitious claim with actual flight data. 55 test flights. More than 51 hours logged in the air. Each flight built around confirming one specific number, whether that was drag reduction, fuel burn, or glide performance under real conditions. The plane a lot of people mocked early on as the flying egg had quietly proven its whole unconventional concept actually worked. Then, out of nowhere, the whole company shifted direction. Instead of pushing the Celera itself into production, Otto Aviation rebranded as Otto Aerospace, brought on a new CEO, relocated headquarters to Texas, and announced a new manufacturing facility going up in Florida. And rather than selling the Celera to customers, they unveiled an entirely different aircraft, the Phantom 3500. It keeps that same laminar flow thinking that made the Celera a success. But this version adds twin Williams FJ44 jet engines and a composite airframe engineered from the ground up for mass production. That's when the whole story finally clicked into place. The Celera was never meant to fly paying passengers commercially. It was a test bed, a flying proof of concept built purely to demonstrate that extreme aerodynamic efficiency wasn't just a theory that only worked inside a wind tunnel. It held up in the real world, and that gave investors enough confidence to back something far bigger down the line. And the response came fast. Flexjet placed an order for 300 Phantom 3500 aircraft, a deal worth around $5 billion, one of the largest business jet orders anyone's seen in recent years. What started out as one strange-looking prototype sitting inside a California hangar ended up shaping the direction of the next generation of business aviation. Looking back on it now, the Celera wasn't a failure just because it never carried a paying passenger. If anything, that was the whole point. It challenged decades of conventional aircraft design thinking, proved that slashing drag could dramatically cut both fuel burn and operating costs, and showed that efficiency and performance don't actually have to fight each other. Sometimes the aircraft that changes everything isn't the one people fly in. It's the one that quietly proves a better way forward is possible. The Celera 500L looked like something that shouldn't have worked at all. But hiding behind that odd shape was an idea strong enough to reshape private aviation. The biggest breakthroughs rarely come from playing it safe and following the rulebook. They come from throwing the rulebook out entirely. So, would you actually get on a plane like this one? Let us know in the comments. And if you're into stories like this, go ahead and subscribe for more.